So we are very excited to have our very own Sartre Stuelke here today. Sartre creates fictional household appliances using 3D printing technologies and produces drawings of his work using 3D modeling software and a drawing robot. He's also used CT and MRI scanners as cameras for his radiology art project. So I just want to say that Sartre has a really unusual background. He straddles art and science. He's both got a Master of Fine Arts from Chicago and an MD. He's an MD with a degree from Cornell University. He's been shown all over the US, Europe, the Middle East. His work has been shown. He's appeared in NBC's Today Show and has had his work featured in many publications. And we are very excited to have him talk to us today about 3D printing in his work and beyond. Take it away, Sartre. Thank you.
Thanks, Fran. I didn't expect you to say anything, so that was kind of a surprise. Yeah, so I do use 3D printing in my work, and I have prepared a slideshow. So hopefully, can you see?
Sartre? Yes, and as you're getting started, I'm just gonna add one more little plug about Sartre, because Sartre's been a member of the New York Artist Circle for many, 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 many years, since near the beginning of our group. And Sartre created our very first website. So I just had to say that. Thank you. Go.
Yeah, it's been 22 years. I think it's exactly 22 years, because I think February 2001 was my first meeting. And my sponsor was Stephanie Brody Letterman.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, 3D printing in art. And I haven't practiced this. I just kind of had to throw it together. So feel free to, I've got time for questions. I don't think it's going to take too long. So, but if you need to stop me, feel free. So can everybody see? I'm not seeing what you're seeing, I think. So can you see this? It should say 3D printing in art as sculpture.
We got it.
Yes.
Great. Okay. So here's a summary of what I'm going to talk about. A short intro. What is 3D printing? What's the current state of 3D printing? How can I use 3D printing for art? And how can I get started? So what is 3D printing? So there are restrictions, like how large can you go? How small can you go? You can go as large as a house. There's several that have been built so far. This one's in Europe. It's currently the largest. It's a 2-story, I think. And you can go really small. That's a finger there at the bottom. I don't know if my pointer isn't working, so I'll just describe it. That's a little couch. So this is not one of my pieces, but this is one of the early forms of 3D printing when I started. So I started 23 years ago, probably around a year before I joined New York Artist Circle. And at that time, there were only a couple of forms that you could do in 3D printing, and the most common one was this, which you use sand and super glue. So you would use a robot that would squirt super glue out as it passed across a layer of sand, and then another that would sweep a new layer over it. So your super glue would go wherever you wanted to end up being solid. So when your print was done, you just had a big sandbox full of sand, and then you dumped it out and your 3D print was in there. So it was really expensive to do that. And I was using 3D printing at that time. I'd have the 3D print as a buck for a mold. So then I would have the print made based on a file I would create with 3D modeling software. And then I would make a mold of that, and then I would cast in resin. So this is one of my earliest pieces done through 3D printing. This is actually a resin sculpture cast from a mold from the original 3D printed object. This is the charismatic. It increases your charisma. So we're still on what is 3D printing. The process is called additive manufacturing, meaning you add to an object. You just keep adding and adding. a familiar concept, of course, in sculpture, like you would do with a wax, just even making a wax model. So you need to have a 3D model, a software representation of the eventual sculpture you're going to make, and that's called an STL, which supposedly stands for stereolithography, but a lot of people say different. But it doesn't matter. It's the file you use. So, and then you use that file, which is made in 3D modeling software, and you pass that file through what's called a slicer that changes or saves another file that's just a text file of G code. And G code is the code that's used to talk to the 3D printer to tell it how to move, how hot to get, how hard to squirt out plastic and stuff like that. So, and it's made into an object by the 3D printer layer by layer. So this G code describes each layer as you go. So it describes the bottom layer, then the next layer, and the next layer. So how many layers do you have? You could have millions of layers. Often my prints often have, let me think, anywhere from 300 to 1,000 layers, depending, you know. So what materials do you use? The most common is thermoplastic, and that's done with FDM printing. And don't worry, I'm gonna tell you what all this means. So FDM means fusion deposition modeling, which is irrelevant, but this is the most common way. You get plastic, which is like in a long thread called filament, and melt it, and then layer by layer make your sculpture. Another form is you use a liquid resin that's cured with a laser, and that's called SLA or DLP, depending, and I'll show you examples of that. You can use both of these technologies to print in wax, but primarily that's done with SLA. And there are some FDM 3D printers that use chocolate as a material, or there's some that make pancakes. So there's all kinds of weird machines being used in this way. So let me see if I can. I've got something blocking what I want to see, but I can't seem to do anything about it. Tell you what I'm going to do. I'll grab my other copy and follow along. Okay, so this is kind of a model of FDM printing. What you see at the top there is the thermoplastic material or filament. Then that gets pushed through a very hot small nozzle, and it's 250 degrees Celsius is about what it is. So that's I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit, but 100 degrees Celsius is 212 in Fahrenheit. So it's incredibly hot. And it just builds layer by layer, as you see there on the right, by moving back and forth, moving up and squirting some more. So advantages of FDM printing, the printers are relatively inexpensive. The materials are relatively inexpensive. You know, like $15 for a kilogram of filament. Printers range from 300 to a few thousand typically. You can use a wide range of materials, different types of plastic with different characteristics. The materials, most of them are renewable. Most of them are non-toxic. The most common are what's called PLA, which is made from corn, and PETG, which is the same kind of plastic as we're familiar with in water bottles. Unfortunately, there's only early recycling programs that are starting, but it shouldn't be too long before it'll be common to recycle all of this. And it's also easier, cheaper, and cleaner than the resin type of printing. Disadvantages, you have limited resolution. In practical terms, you can't get a whole lot better than 0.2 millimeters. You can, depending on the kind of printer you have, go down further. But imagine trying to print something that's, I don't know, 12 inches high, when it takes you 100 layers to get to 5 millimeters, which in 5 millimeters is about 1/4 of an inch. So you're talking it's going to take you a week to print anything of significance, even though you'll have very high resolution. So that's why I say it's not practical. Some materials are really toxic and they require venting. I don't use any of these, but a lot of people do. ABS is supposed to be one of the easiest things to print, but it's toxic when it gets hot. So you have to vent everything out and it smells terrible. I'm not interested in that, but it is common. You also need to be fairly good at tinkering with things because your 3D printer will break down or get clogged and you will have to deal with it. And it also requires some understanding of software code. But there is a whole lot of support, which I'll tell you about later. There's a large community of people that can help you with this stuff. This is one of the most common 3D printers. It's called the Prusa MKS. You can purchase them ready to go and you just take them out of the box and put them on your desk and start printing. It also comes in a kit that if you're good at tinkering, you can put it together. And it's what is it, about 8 inches by 8 inches by 8 inches, about the size that it can print. This is my printer. It's a Railcore 2 300ZL, if you want to get technical about it. You cannot buy these ready-made. You have to build them from scratch, basically. You can buy a kit and then you have to put it all together. I built this in 2019. And it's been going strong ever since. I've had it in an exhibition going all day, every day for 2 months. It's very robust. And I'm only showing you printers that are actually kind of reasonable for artists who don't want to spend a lot of time fixing things. So the Prusa is really good. The Railcore is really good. This is another one of my printers that I gave away to an artist group so they could print, but this is just as an example of it working. Right here, it's making one of my sculptures, and you can see the outside of the print is solid, right? It's smooth and solid. The inside is sort of a mesh, so you don't have to print these solid, right? Like this helps you save in material, and it's just as strong. Here's another example. This is my Railcore printing a whole bunch of these small sculptures I was working on. These are just parts. So you can see the inside of the print is mostly just air and the outside is solid. Here's an example. I wanted to talk about resolution a little. These are called benchies. They're kind of a favorite print in the 3D printing world. There's every little area in them has something to do with the quality of your printer and helps you tune your printer or make adjustments to make prints better. So both of these were printed on my Railcore, and this gives you an idea. These layers are 0.2 millimeters. So that gives you an idea of what you can expect with FDM resolution. So this is obviously very, very enlarged, but so it's pretty good. And if you have a really good printer, a lot of times you can't really even see them very well. You have to get really, really close. For example, here's another little dragon I made for my kids on the Railcore. So the resolution can be pretty impressive. So what's the current state of 3D printing? Well, for artists specifically, compared to even just for, what has it been now, 3 or 4 years, even just 3 or 4 years ago, there have been some really great strides into making 3D printing easier for everybody. There's some higher quality printers where you don't need to be able to have a lot of mechanical skill to have them or run them. You will have a few problems, but a lot of problems have been made simpler to solve or eliminated that used to be a big problem. You can download models if you don't have 3D modeling skills. There's a whole lot of pre-made stuff. Of course, that wouldn't be your own art, but it can get you started on learning how things are printed. Here's a couple of websites. Thingiverse and Printables are the two most common ones. But if you want to make your own, you either need to have your own modeling skills, and if you don't already have them, you can depend on about 6 months to learn one of these programs. Nomad Sculpt, though, a lot of people seem to naturally learn quickly on that. That's for iPads and what is the other one? Android tablets. And I'll talk about that too in a little bit. Or if you don't want to learn these programs, you can hire someone out to do it. And I've used Fiverr.com. I don't know if any of you have ever used it before, but it's like a really huge kind of public clearinghouse where you can find anybody who will do anything, pretty much. So like there's musicians on there that one of the most common ways to use it is musicians need a certain bass line recorded so they can put it in their own piece of music. So you can hire a bassist to for like $100, you know, here, I want you to do 5 minutes of this bass line or whatever. So the same thing applies to 3D models. You can send somebody drawings from like all 3 views or as many views as you want and say, hey, could you make a model for this so I can do some 3D printing? It's very common. So how can you use 3D printing for art? I guess it just depends on your what your goals are for art. I'll show you what I do. So you saw that print earlier. I don't have a single print through the entire process, but what I do is I use a special filament that has a whole lot of paper in it. So it basically just has plastic that binds the paper together. And the reason I do that is because plaster or any kind of, you know, similar, any kind of glue or whatever, anything that'll stick to paper sticks really well to this. You can use the other plastics. Certain things won't stick very well, like water-based things aren't going to stick really well to PETG, for example. But I like to use water-based stuff in work because I work in my apartment and I don't want to stink people out. And I can go to the roof occasionally, but have to have good weather, of course. So this is the first step after I print is I just cover everything with a water-based plaster kind of thinned out. You can see I brushed it on here. Then I sand it smooth. So like all of those little lines we saw earlier just have plaster in them now. So this is very smooth and ready for painting. So then I prime it with a water-based primer and a brush, and it gets very smooth. And then the reason this is red is because I just happen to have a whole lot of high gloss red latex paint. So I need this glossy surface because I eventually gold leaf these or silver leaf or whatever. And this one is the step right after I prime. Then I'm using this, gosh, I can't even remember what it's called, sizing, I think, but it's a glue for leaf. And you can see on the edges there's some of the gold I'm putting on it. This is after I've got all the gold leaf on, and then this is after I've burnished it through. So this is that print that was printing on that earlier, that blue one we saw. So this one is copper leafed. This is the one you saw at the beginning up above. And this one is a little different. I made this out of PETG, so I had to use something that would really stick to it to smooth it out. And I was using Bondo, you know, like if you have a car accident, you have to, and you can't get the metal smooth, the mechanics use this stuff called Bondo. So I use a very thin, watered down version of it, or thinned out, not water. And so that's just this is after it was done. So the Bondo's done, and then use car paint to finish it. And this is a video. I don't know if I can get it. Oh, it's working. Okay, good. So this piece is called the Visionary. It's like an oracle, and you touch it like I touched up there, and it gives you images that then is basically the Oracle telling you something. So you have to figure out what that is. And this is another one. This is the status monitor. Tells you what your status is. So moving on, I wanted to make a bronze. So you can, this is one of my pieces that I made into a bronze, and this was the first step. And this was actually why I built the rail core, is because at the time, it was the only printer I had ever seen that could have the quality where you could make sure everything lines up just right. And so this is the print. This is a special kind of filament called polycast that's used in bronze casting to do investment casting. So these are the parts that I worked together with the foundry, and they told me how they wanted things to be cut up. And so I did that, sent it out. And then after printing, I filled in what little gaps there were with very hard wax, and then used up in the upper left here. There's no pointer. I don't know why my pointer isn't working, but that's a nylon stocking, and it was amazing. I would just polish that wax with the nylon stocking, and it just turned super glossy, which was really cool. And then I sent it off to the foundry, and they sent this back to me. It didn't take long, about 4 weeks later, I think. So this is one really super huge advantage for artists in 3D printing, is that, right now, the common thing is you make a wax and you send it off to the foundry, and then they have like 12 steps before they get to the final step. When you 3D print with this filament, you eliminate about 6 steps. So not only that, it's much cheaper. It costs about half as much, and you get the same result. So I love this piece. It weighs so much, though. It's only I don't know, it's only maybe 8 inches high, and it's very, very heavy, but it's really cool. So then that's it for my processes. And then I wanted to tell you about SLA, because the other really common use for 3D printing for artists is for people who make jewelry. And they pretty exclusively use the SLA technique and technology. And the way it works is you have a platform that raises up and down, and each layer it'll raise up a little more, but you have this sort of vat full of this liquid resin, and a laser can solidify the resin and stick it to the platform. So then you do your first layer, second layer, and so on and so on. And eventually you get a finished print. So what's the advantages of SLA? Well, you're using a laser. So you're talking nanometers. You have ultra high resolution, extremely high. You will never see the layers. So then you don't have a need to post-process your surface if you want a smooth sculpture. So there are plenty of artists actually who use 3D printing, and they don't do any post-processing because they like the layer lines. I personally don't, so you saw my process. And like that other filament, the polycast filament for bronze casting, you can go direct to either lost wax if you print in wax, or investment casting, also for wax or a similar resin. Disadvantages are huge. It's really messy. It's resin, right? So resin is never good as far as I'm concerned around my skin. Some of the resins are very smelly, and many of them are quite toxic. Some of them need ventilation, and the resins are very expensive. The printers are expensive, and the resins are expensive. So there are some cheaper ones, but you got to keep in mind you get what you pay for in this case. And it also, the same as before, it requires some understanding of software code. And again, there's a lot of support out there. So this is an example. This is called a Formlabs Form 3. And you can see all of the reason that's orange is to protect your eyes from the laser. And you can see the model or the print that's coming out. And notice that the person who's taking it out is wearing gloves. You can't let this stuff touch your skin. It's not good for you. But this is from Formlabs website, and it's just a few of the resins they talk about. These are some of the jewelry making pieces that people can do now. They're very elegant and very elaborate sometimes, but they have, castable wax resin, 2 different kinds of castable wax resins and prototype resins, and it's just some examples. These resins are like, I don't know, I looked at it for a second and I can't remember. I think it's about $200 for a couple of cups of this resin. So it's pretty pricey, but it doesn't take a lot to make what you're doing, at least in this situation. Here's this is the Form 3L. It's a pretty big one. And you can see it's got a big size, 13 by 8 by 12 inches. So, and you can see, there's the price. It's $11,000. So they get pretty expensive. And this isn't even one of the big ones from this. So how can I get started? Well, for FDM printing, the small range, the smallest really good printer is the Prusa Mini. Costs about 400 to 500, and you get a build volume of about 7 inches cubed. Medium range, a little larger, 10 to 12 inches cubed. The price goes up. So again, Prusa makes one. It's about $1,000 fully made, but there's another company called Bamboo that just came out that actually I would recommend over the Prusa. Typically, they make better prints, slightly better, but they're really amazing. And they also have streamlined your interface. So it makes it so much easier for people who really don't know how to deal with a lot of stuff. And then a large range, you can go up to, this is 16 inches to 20 inches cubed, depending on, what you get. And the range is about $1,000 to $5,000. And I just gave my Rail Core is probably the smallest of the large range. So what about resin printers? So quite a difference, a little bit smaller in the small range, $3,500 to $5,000 to get started. There is this much cheaper one that a lot of people have had really good experiences with, called the Elegoo Saturn, and that's only $500. So that might be kind of an outlier. I've heard a few bad things about it, but I've heard a lot of good things about it. Medium range, $10,000 to $15,000, but you get considerably bigger. Keep in mind too, let's say you want to make a full-size figure sculpture. You don't have to, you can print it in parts and put it together. And that's what you do when you get prints that are really large. So it is possible to just, separate things out, and there's software that helps you do that. So anything larger than that is basically, in my book, is unaffordable. Many thousands of dollars, $50,000 to $100,000 to $200,000. So what do you do when you need something and you can't afford the printer? Go ahead and outsource. And these are 3 of my favorite ones, especially Treat Stock. I'm going to talk about it in a second. Another is called Jaws Tech. They use different technology. They use laser sintering. It's different. They have some really cool prints. They don't do the wax stuff. So if you want to do casting, you can talk to them about it. They might be able to. And then Shapeways is more of a professional level. Like that's car companies use them to prototype their car parts, but a lot of people use them for everyday stuff, one-off stuff too. So
Sartre,
yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. It's almost 11.
Oh,
so I'm just going to ask you to wrap up. Okay.
Yeah, let's wrap up. So Treat Stock is, if you want people to do your own printing, do your printing for you, That's like your mom and pop operation. Go there and you can choose anybody you want, somebody who lives nearby. You can talk directly to them. The 3D printers, these are the companies I recommend to look at. What we're going to do, I guess this is being recorded, but I can also give you the file of this so we can send that out to people. So because everything's in here.
Great.
These are all just websites at the end. So I think that's pretty much, yeah, that's pretty much all I said. And there's my email if you have direct questions. And that's the end.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. That was an amazing talk, because I don't do this kind of work, but it makes me want to do it. Really cool. So officially we're about to end the meeting. So if anybody needs to leave, thank you for being here for the February meeting of the New York Artists Circle. But if people have a few minutes to stay on, yes, Eileen, is that okay? We can do some Q&A. Eileen, you're muted.
Yeah, we have about 10 minutes.
Okay, is that okay for you, Sartre?
10 minutes for what?
For
Questions?
Q&A, if
Sure,
people
yeah.
have questions.
That's
Okay.
fine.
Great. So let's see if anybody has any questions. I don't see anything written in the chat. Would anybody like to ask a question of Sartre? Yeah, okay, Ali, great, thank you.
Yeah, hi. First of all, round of applause, Sartre. Sorry, I only have one hand to do it, but I'm giving it to you right now. And right. And what was so interesting to me, and I need to understand, because I went on your site and I loved your outlet and, you know, the different 3D models that you had done. I don't remember, was that on Insta or where, but you should put in the chat so we can look at your art, because your art is really, really pretty wonderful. And I loved the surface, the finish. And I thought it was all in the 3D printing. And I was shocked to see your talk today to understand how many steps to get to the final product. Because in my mind, 3D printing is all, you set it up, you press a button, and then you get this cute little thing when it's finished, you know? And so how much time from start to finish would it take you to do, even if you were printing 10 of the outlets, for example, with the you know, the different expressions, even if you're doing 10 or 12 of them, then to actually take one and sand it and paint and all that, how many hours of your time would you say it took for one?
Gosh, that's a good question. Well, I can tell you so for that, the larger prints, just to print them, take anywhere from 1 to 2 days. And you know, I don't do everything all at once. So like I'll put the coat on and then set it aside. But I would say it takes like a month to go from beginning to end, working on it, maybe 3 hours a day tops. So it can take quite a lot of time for the really big ones. The smaller ones, you know, not so much time. And so I suppose like if I made it all in, because I do them all, I do a lot at the same time. So to make it individual, I guess, you know, it would probably be like 3 or 4 days of solid full days of work. You know, not a lot faster than I used to do on my my resin sculptures. So I used to do resin and fiberglass, and those would take months from beginning to end.
And toxic, very toxic.
Very toxic.
Resin, yeah. I have to tell people, Sartre's right, stay away from resin unless you are really outdoors, unless you have a professional system cleaning the air. Yeah, very dangerous. But
Sartre, someone's
fantastic. Thank you.
Sorry, Sartre, Carolyn Oberst is asking, can you use 3D printing for framing? I guess framing paintings or drawings.
Of course, sure. In fact, there's a really good video of Neil Patrick Harris making a frame for a painting that he has, two paintings that are huge. They're like maybe 7 feet high, 6 or 7 feet high.
Wow.
So, and he's totally ignorant of how to do stuff. So he, that's digital or computer based. So it walks through, it's really fun. He works with this guy called Joel Telling, who's known as the 3D printing nerd, who kind of holds his hand here and there and lets him know what to do. But yeah, I guess you could go to YouTube and look up Neil Patrick Harris frame, and you can see how he does it. It's ridiculously flamboyant. I mean, it's just insane. So you could also do regular
That's
frame.
funny. Funny that you just pulled that out of your hat. I love that that exists. Somebody else asks, do maker spaces offer this equipment, and can you print in translucent wax?
Yes, so a lot of maker spaces do. I know there's a lot in Manhattan and Brooklyn. And they have, so the way they generally work is you pay a monthly fee to be a member, and then you can just come in anytime you want and use the equipment. You have to be trained on it typically, but you don't have to know a whole lot. There's a lot of 3D printing manufacturing places in Brooklyn as well. And I mean, they're all over the place. So you can
And
check
translucent.
translucent.
Cool.
wax.
Sorry. Just wax.
So that would just be dependent on what you would get for your material. So if the printer can handle the material, then yes. The rest of it, I don't print in that material, so I'm not real clear on how it's used. Generally, the resin printers will print in a translucent hard resin, not usually a wax, if you want a translucent sculpture. But they also print in wax. I don't know if there's a translucent wax resin available.
Huh. Okay. So someone else asks, oh, Norma asks again, does the art behind you have any connection to the work you talked about?
Oh, well, this is one of my favorite painters. It's not my work. And it does have a connection. This is Morgan Carver, who's actually two people. Yeah, I can show you. These are, I'm trying to line this up. It's not so easy. So these are 6 of their pieces. And it's a lot like my own work because it's kind of funny, but it's also more like Edward Hopper's work. It's not,
it's like someone took your sculptures and put them into Edward Hopper's themes.
Yes.
It's really interesting.
And in fact,
what's the name of the artist?
I'm sorry. Oh, it's Morgan Carver.
Morgan Carver. Okay.
I don't know much about them. It's very hard to find information. The only thing I know is that it was a male and a female together that would collaborate on these paintings. And I think one of them died. I'm not sure. They're just, you can't see anything anymore. Yeah. But I'm actually using these sculptures in these paintings to learn new software. So I'm trying to recreate them to learn some new parts of software that I'm going to be using this year to do my own drawings, actually. So.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. You said you used a robot drawing.
Yeah, I use a Axie Draw. Yeah.
Wow. Okay, that'll be the next talk, part 2. Okay, Pamela says, and she speaks for all of us, this was a fascinating meeting and so informative about something few of us have experience with. Thank you, Sartre. And thank you, Pamela, for thanking us too.